Let's start the show.
Good idea.
This is the GPL Podcast, sponsored by Jerry Peters and First Class Mortgage. Our expertise, your peace of mind. Visit us at firstclassmortgage.com. Now, here's Jupe and Vigo. Good evening and welcome to the GPL Podcast, episode number 188. Well, we're bringing back our very first guest, and it's for the record 9th time. Frank Mazzocco was on show number 2. More than 10 years ago now. You were on show number 2, Frank. We didn't have a guest the first show. We were just trying to figure it out. But Frank, welcome back to the 9th time to the GPL Podcast.
Thanks. I thought I was on the first show, and I thought I was really adventurous back at the time, but
not quite. But that we were just trying something back then. We weren't live back then. We were just recording. I believe even that first show, we actually had video so we could see each other, but we've been doing audio ever since. Been doing live audio for at least 7 or 8 years. And this season we went to live video with everyone Zooming now. Everyone's got the technology that we can see you for the podcast now, Frank.
Well, we can see you. I mean, it's really enhanced the show. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm like,
we can hear you just fine.
I have a microphone in my hand. I think it just made the show sharper, cleaner, more spontaneous, and so it's a good addition. Congratulations.
I think it's fun just to see people's reactions, because a lot of times there's a lot of visual cues that you're not going to get on audio. Obviously, audio is still the big thing, and we record the show and whatnot. What's become popular actually is the overtime part. We've had an overtime go. We had an overtime go 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Oh no!
With Paul Caponigri. He was in Florida, so it was getting close to 1 a.m. his time when we shut down. But
with his talent fees, you probably went broke. I mean, I'm giving you the bargain rate.
Well, he gets the same bargain rate. He loves coming on the show, and we love having him. We love having you. But it's just that bonus for people who watch live. You get the audio recording. You're not going to get the overtime. It's for the people who watch live. So we love this bit, and it's a fun adventure. What was also a fun adventure this week, Vigo, is our team bounced back from a terrible series with Wisconsin and shut out the Fighting Irish.
That was the team I was hoping to see this season, weekend and weekend and weekend. They brought back so much veteran talent up front, and that's been the spot of this program that's been kind of a weakness the last couple of years, is forwards who aren't engaged and who can't drive the game. They commit turnovers, feed the other team's offense, and just make the game harder for themselves than they should. What we saw this last weekend was a team that was committed to playing a very honest game. We saw a team that put pucks to the crease and followed it up. And we saw a team take advantage of space and make really fun, creative plays. And we saw a couple goals this weekend that were just great bing, bang, bingo plays that were pretty to watch. And we also saw some plays that were hard, gritty plays. And we didn't see them turn the puck over a lot, which was just, that's how you have to play Notre Dame. And after that Wisconsin series, I was worried. I posted on GPL this week. Yep, we can step away from the ledge. It's still another step away. It's still right there. That ledge is there for any college athlete to just step back towards. But for this weekend, they stepped away and they played the way they have to do to be successful, not just in the Big Ten, but going forward, maybe in a tournament that could happen this year.
On the flip side, Frank, actually, Vig's kind of mentioned there, they didn't turn the puck over, meaning they had a lot of good puck possession. And when you have good puck possession and you're in good position, it not only lends to the offensive side, but it also lends to the defensive side. And obviously, back-to-back shutouts for LaFontaine. It's not all him. I don't think he had too many huge times where he was like struggling or anything, but it was the team defense in front of him that was just outstanding all weekend.
Agreed. It's well, first of all, I'm going to back a little bit.
Okay.
It is Gopher hockey. We live on the edge. I mean, it's just why is it so crazy that they lose 2 to Wisconsin and you think, well, this is it. They're done. I mean, but they really have shown in the last, I don't know how many years, as the teams have had a better personality, they tend to be able to rebound pretty darn well. If they fall flat Friday, tend to come back on Saturday. But it's that inconsistency that drives you nuts. And you think one bad pass out of the defensive zone and the whole ship is going to go right down the tank. But they come back. And who can have a absolutely perfect season anyway? But when this team is playing like they played against Notre Dame, you really got to know your stuff to find out what they aren't doing quite well, because it's really close to like a 98% grade. I mean, they really are good. Vigo would fill in that 2%. That's why he's on this show every week, right?
He's the smart one. I just push you in the right direction, right, Biggs?
Well, Don in his last year told me that I was smarter than I looked.
A face for radio. A face for radio.
Don. Yeah. Thanks, Don Lucia.
The Don
At least it wasn't
you.
over Zoom. At least it wasn't over Zoom when he told it to me.
The Don liked you, though.
He acknowledged you in the room. I mean, that's.
I know. Pretty exciting, high level stuff there.
But I mean, let's talk about that kind of Vigs. Frank talks about a team personality, and and that kind of starts at the top with Mazzocco. It's sorry, Motzko's not a stiff like Lucia was. I'm sorry, he was just kind of a stiff, especially the further along he got.
Well, and I think there was that kind of eggshell feel to everybody in the program.
Yeah,
the leaders weren't always all in. There were a lot of people. You start to get to the end of the season, they're excited to talk to the NHL scouts after the game. They're looking for their points. They're trying to push for offense. They're not playing an honest game. It's kind of like they got one foot out the door already. Maybe there's just a different demeanor right now with this team. You're seeing it in the battle level at faceoffs. I know that was a big part of the weekend against Notre Dame, was to compete for draws. So you're not chasing the puck all the time. There's also an emphasis on blocking shots. So you're helping your goalie out. You're trying to stop the other team from getting easy pucks to the net, and you're just kind of lowering the risk there. And you're also seeing players get deeper in the offensive zone to break the puck out. When you talk about puck support, that usually starts with your center playing below the dots. They've got 4 centers who can do that right now, and it really makes a big difference in their game. If you can win draws and you've got centers who play all 200 feet, the game gets a lot easier.
Well, it was just a good weekend all around, helped out by Wisconsin and Michigan splitting at Michigan last weekend, allowing Minnesota to get back up into first place and to control their own destiny again, Frank, which they lost once, the Badgers came in and swept them.
Yeah, that series certainly had a big effect. And I also, I'll throw it to both of you guys too, which I hadn't thought about until now. So you had the immediate pass with the flat, really subpar weekend against Wisconsin. And then you go back to the last time they played Notre Dame, 2 very flat games. So they almost had like a 4-game make good going when they went into Indiana last weekend. And I'm wondering how much the 4 games collectively may have helped inspire them to dig down a little harder, to play a little deeper. And okay. So do you want to answer that, or do you want me to just ramble on? I got another thing to say too.
Well, I think one thing we got out of these weekends is that the leadership of the team didn't let this marinate any further. I think Brandon McManus talked about this after the Friday game against Notre Dame. He said, Rabs noticed it and called it out. He said, on the bench, when guys aren't playing the right way and are turning over pucks or in the wrong position defensively or cheating, guys on the bench are calling each other out and saying, hey, you need to be here. You can't be there. And it's not the coaches leading this change. It's the players holding each other accountable. And I think that's a level of commitment to a team game that's been missing a little bit. Maybe the leaders haven't found their game and they're still seeking it, so they don't feel confident in setting the standard, or they're already looking ahead to what they're going to be doing in April and May and don't want to invest the time in it. So I think we have a little bit of a difference there. And that's what happened after the Wisconsin week. They had that Monday practice where they paid the program back an hour. After the Notre Dame series, the first time, they had a battle practice to kind of raise the intensity a little bit. So we've seen some responses, and I think that's the encouraging thing there.
And I don't just think it's like the one leader or anything like that. I think of somebody like Justin Cluse, who bled maroon and gold. He really cared, but he wasn't quite able to get the buy-in of everyone else at the same time. It seems like now they have that. They have the lead. People will listen to the leadership. Maybe, Cluse really wanted to have that, and he definitely had the heart. Boy, he really gave it his all when he was here, but it was just the ones around him who didn't quite have that.
It takes more than one. You need more than one leader on a team. It's just, the guy who has the C, he can't get all 20 players going. It's got to be a couple guys on different lines who can keep it going and keep it organized.
In different age groups,
this team has enough in different age groups. And this team's got pretty good balance that way. So every line's got some guys who are very reliable, honest players. And it helps. I think seeing Jackson Nelson play with Walker and McLaughlin paid dividends this last weekend. He plays a heavy game. He's good on draws, and he helps support those guys so they can go out and create offense.
How about our boy who got booted twice recently?
Jackson Nelson?
Yeah.
I think it's hard to pin too much on him. He's a big kid, and hits like that in the college game are always going to get called that way. There was a lot of flack on Twitter. I even had a couple of people DMing me with comments on it. Every time in amateur hockey, that's going to get called that way. In the pro game, those might not even be penalties. The refs
technically it's not, but when a head snaps like that, they're going to call it even if he didn't hit him in the head.
The big open ice hit is something that's just not there in the college game. The only way it maybe doesn't get called is if you just go straight through them. But anytime you have that kind of glancing blow kind of collision, it's going to be a penalty.
What did you think of that open ice hit, Frank?
It was a terrible penalty. I mean, I just thought it was a clean hit. It was hard. I even got a voicemail from a friend who said in the middle of the game, which I couldn't answer. It took me till after. Who said I've watched that just as many times as you have, and he says, and it's still a terrible call. I mean, I think technically it was just it was a hard hit, but Troop, you're right. When that head snaps like that, that's going to get the attention of even a ref who can see the play. I mean, I called it whiplash when I saw it, but and it really did look bad. But once you look at the video, I think they could have loosened up. Even, I don't know, even give them a double minor for roughing or something. But I just don't think it was a by the book penalty.
It probably wasn't
contact to the head. It was not contact to the head, but it was a dangerous hit.
Like you said, in the pros, that doesn't even get called. Probably in the juniors, that doesn't even get called.
Hockey's a dangerous game.
It is a dangerous game, but like you're seeing in college football right now, they're trying to protect players who are defenseless. It's gonna hurt them as they go up in levels when all of a sudden they have to deal with those kind of hits a little more. But in the college game, they're trying to take that hit out. The idea of contact in hockey in its truest sense is to separate the player from the puck and to gain possession. It's not to intimidate. It's not to injure. It's not to send a message. That's the difference between amateur hockey and professional hockey.
But the difference is in pro hockey is to send a message.
It is.
Pro hockey is all about sending messages.
But do you think Nelson was doing any of those last three things that you suggest? And I don't either.
I don't either. I don't think he was, but I think that's why they have the game that they do in college, is they want to take that hit out.
Yeah, no, I it sounds like I'm saying the guy was, Bakich was a wimp on the deal, and I'm not saying that.
No.
I mean, he took a hard hit and should have been hurting right from that hit. But I think Bob Mazzocco said it very well, kind of in the heat of the moment, right on our post-game show. He's a big boy. He's going to have to learn how to throw hits like that without blowing people up. He has to learn to tone that back a little bit.
And I think Sampo Ranta is a player who has kind of figured that out a little bit. Like, you've watched him deliver certain hits this year. He knows when to lay the wood, like he did on Notre Dame's captain on Saturday, which Bob called out after the game, calling that his favorite play Ranta made over the weekend. It wasn't the pretty goals. It wasn't the nice assists. It was hitting their defensive captain on his tail on the forecheck. That's what Bob liked. He's like, I don't even recall the pretty between the legs pass on the back door. That doesn't even ring a bell to me.
Oh boy, that was a
hit
beautiful
that he
play.
laid.
That was a
that
beautiful
hit he laid.
play.
I like that. And I think Sampo's kind of learned, like, he's a big body. And when he first got to the Gophers, he took some bad offensive zone penalties trying to do what he thought he was supposed to do, which is come in hard on the forecheck and hit people. And he made the mistake a couple of times of hitting people from behind or boarding them. And he's kind of learned where to draw the line a little bit. And he said in the post game, you've got to learn that part of the game.
Which goalie did he blow up on home ice? Was that the Notre Dame goalie? One of those series? I can see a dark jersey, and I'm wondering if it was.
I don't remember.
Well, I mean, the coaches tell him to drive to the net.
Well, he was, and then he couldn't stop. He absolutely couldn't stop, and he just got a charging call. I thought it was.
I'll take those calls. If it's an offensive penalty and that's it, and he's trying to get to the goal, that's about the only offensive penalty I don't mind at all. The rest of them. Well, when he's cut the corner and trying to cut in, and he's got the puck, I think it's a little different than purposely charging the goal. I mean, it's an aggressive play that has really given him dividends and goals. So I'm not such a huge deal on that.
I'm thankful we have physical play. We have players who can play physical.
Yes.
And it's really difficult to do on our large ocean that we call 3M Arena at Mariucci. That's a big rink. And if you can't
and
build
a big name too.
Yeah. You can't build your team around a bunch of hitters and play on that rink. You got to build for speed. But I mean, you look down the middle, you got Reedy, not down the middle, but you look up front, you got Reedy and Ranta and Nelson and Myers. They can play big, strong players up front. When's the last time the Gophers had 4 guys up front that could play strong like that, physically strong?
And Perbix. Perbix has done a nice job at center too now. Sure. He plays a heavy game.
Yep. And Munson's going to go in there, maybe not quite as heavy as the others, but he's going to go in there too.
Well, it's not sounding like, with the way the finances are right now, that the rink change is going to happen anytime soon. They still want to do it, but.
Well, they're going to have to do something pretty soon because that rink, that refrigeration system is going to be obsolete.
Correct. It's getting tougher and tougher to buy the refrigerant. Right. Correct.
Yeah. So we go to the Board of Regents and ask for another loan.
No, good luck with that. Viggs, I see you already nod no.
What if they have to replace the rink? If that refrigeration system somehow goes out sometime, what are they going to do?
Well,
There is discussion that they don't have to use donor or athletic funds potentially for that piece of it, the refrigerant upgrade. But the problem is they want to do the rink resizing at the same time, which is an additional cost. So what I've heard is that there is probably some way for them to get some of the funding from the state for their HEPR funding. That's basically like for upgrading and repairing buildings. And it's a amount that the legislature agrees to give the university every year to do projects. This could be part of those projects because it's a required update. But the rink size change, that's different. That's going to take a donor to step forward, like the Peltiers and the Nannies have done in the past, and give it to the hockey program to make that update.
And maybe they can
find that donor.
And maybe they can fix the goal by the Zamboni doors too.
Maybe, maybe they can put the pipe in a different spot.
Well, it is true, Frank, that the goals are not quite lined up the same. The goal near the Zamboni doors is slightly moved over because was it about 10 years ago when Lucia wanted to make the space behind the net smaller, so he brought the red line back. Doing this, they had to drill new holes, and they couldn't drill exact spot straight back. They had to go over a couple inches to not hit a pipe. So the goal by the Zamboni's door is like a couple inches one way or the other. And maybe the hole's not so deep, and that's why, need to mix in a salad. Napier always knocks it off.
Yeah, the U budget's in a tough spot. They already are going to be, $30 million under budget this year based on revenues lost from ticket sales, reduced TV money coming in. They're going to have to take a bridge loan, and then they're going to be having to pay $2 or $3 million to get that debt down for the next 10 or 15 years. And that's basically like another capital project thrown in Mark Coyle's lap. Here you go. Congrats. Deal with the pandemic and have to take out a bridge loan because they can't run a deficit. They're going to have to do some financing to balance their books at the end of the year. We'll find out probably what that's going to be closer to May, June. They just released their financials from last fiscal year this last week. And you could already see some of the impact by March Madness getting canceled in the revenues coming in.
It's the Wooger's fault, isn't it? The Wooger wanted an Olympic Arena. He got it. Nanny's like, he mentioned it in Jess Meyer's article. It's like, I never wanted that.
How many people at the time said they never wanted that?
Oh, yeah, he was probably the only one. I don't think people didn't care back then.
Well,
he says it more now, but
at the time it was the way to go. Players were getting better, faster, more skilled. Let's go to the Olympic rink. They had 6 of them in the WCHA.
Those few times we had Olympics on, with the pro players on the big rink. Wow.
Well, yeah.
That was good stuff.
Right.
But in college, when you were Viggs, you love to talk about how college players make mistakes. It's just much more pronounced out there when you get so much more space to go around somebody, or it's harder to hit somebody because you got 15 more feet to go to get to the boards. They can't fix that. They can only bring it in to about 91. It was something around that they can't go.
Well, and the big thing is to change the radius on the corners, so it's not as
they can change it. Yep.
Because that's a big thing when they narrow the rink to 91 feet or whatever, kind of like they have at Notre Dame, which Blake McLaughlin might really like. He likes that size of rink apparently, but that's the big thing is shrink the rink a little bit, tighten up the corners. It forces everything to come back to the middle much, much faster.
All right. Well, there you go. Well, first, before we get to some things, and actually Pat Micheletti called you out about a month ago here, Frank.
On this show.
He did a little bit. But before we get to that.
But not to my face.
Before we get to that, we have to hear from our sponsor.
Hey, fellow GPLers, this is Jerry Peters from First Class Mortgage. Interest rates are near all-time lows and property values are on the rise. Lower your interest rate and remove monthly PMI at the same time to save thousands of dollars. Or use the equity in your home for debt consolidation and home improvement. The housing market is still hot, so make sure you're prepared by getting a pre-approval letter from me before you start shopping. Mention you heard about me on the GPL podcast and receive a $300 closing cost credit. Some restrictions do apply. Call me today at 612-940-3291 or visit firstclassmortgage.com to fill out a free online application. My NMLS number is 480200. First Class Mortgages is 322842. This is not an offer to lock into an interest rate agreement under Minnesota law. First Class Mortgage is an equal housing lender.
And of course, we thank Jerry, as always, for sponsoring the GPL podcast. Well, right before the commercial, I mentioned Pat Micheletti kind of called you out during his debut of the podcast back in, I think it was November, December. And he pretty much says your marinara sauce sucks. He says you need to do better, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
He went right to your Italian, right into the Italian home right there. I mean, what do you say to old Pat on that?
I don't want to cook off with Pat because this will be the truth, right? Of course, when people say this is the truth, then it really isn't, but this is the truth. My sauce, my family sauce, is very good, but it's not as spiced as he would have it, and therefore a lot of people would side by side would think mine is flat. But if you come over to my house and we're going to do pasta and have the sauce, and it would be very good. So now, is his better? The only thing I was able to get him on is he was bragging about his on the air. And he said, and then we add the sausage. And I said, well, where do you get your sausage? And I said, well, I buy it at the store. I said, oh, store-bought sausage in your homemade sauce?
Well, you can go to a meat market and get a nice,
Well, I had to slam him with something. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, if you're a true chef, for your top meals, you have a butcher in mind for certain meals. And I think that's a valid argument there, Frank. If he's not saying Lowry Hill meats or, ready cuts down on Johnson or Marinos or
the meat,
Marchicks,
then make your own, grind it, get the casing, make your own sausage that way. Yep.
Okay. Well, here we go. This summer, then we're having a cook-off.
Oh no, we're not.
We're gonna have a gathering at your house, Frank. Yeah, we're Well, that's perfect timing there. COVID. There's so many questions, people talking about, and what's your favorite broadcast place and what's location. And this year you're not going on the road at all. You're stuck at TCF Bank. I suppose that's good and bad.
Maybe.
Oh, well, maybe.
That's all I'm going to say. Just maybe.
What a tease that is.
That's a tease, and that's as far as I can go with my NDA.
How has it gone for you with the TV feeds? You guys sound pretty smooth. Like it sounds great, which is all that really matters. But yeah, obviously you're not getting close to the players. You're not having as many conversations with players. Like you would say, like after you're done interviewing them, you might get a couple scoops or something like that, or just the interaction with them and people and coaches. How has it been for you this year?
Well, it hasn't been ideal, but it's a lot better than I ever hoped for. Excuse me. So yeah, no, it's not ideal. You miss the contact with the players, and I'm just talking about really little things like you pass in the hotel lobby and you might just exchange some small talk, or you might say, did he really get hit in the head, or did, were we seeing things? You might get just a little different insight here and there, or in the coffee shop. Or of course, then, on the Thursday night if they skate in the visiting rink, or the Friday morning when they have morning skate, you can pick up a lot more stuff hanging around the rink in those situations. So you miss that. We can do it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
There's some that are thinking that we might have to do this again next year. I don't know. I'm not enough of an expert on this to know whether it'll clear up. But here we go. I got in trouble before when I did this, but I hope we don't do this forever. Road games from a studio, and but it's a real possibility.
I think it might be more of the future for television, maybe, than radio. Television's quite, that's quite expensive to put on a TV show and to send people. And I'm guessing, a lot of times, obviously Wally and you guys bring your own equipment and things like that. So yeah.
But TV brings in much more revenue, right?
True.
To float that. So perspective, I don't know. I don't know what the dollars are.
Do you miss the travel?
I was thinking of this question. I miss Friday morning and Saturday morning breakfast. Somebody that serves me a meal of my choice when I'm just waking up.
I have papers to worry about. You go fix your own breakfast, Frank. Well,
I do not miss the trying to get to the bus on time.
yeah.
It's just another deadline during the day and I don't do well with deadlines, right? I'm kind of a free floater, sometimes I'm a floater, and I just, so I really have to work hard to make sure I'm at the bus ahead of time. And so there's that little bit of that I don't.
Because you travel much more than you did with television. I mean, with radio, you were going to Anchorage. You were going to the playoffs. Whereas, once MSC/FSN was done, your year was done. But now you're traveling much more than you did back in your TV days.
Right.
Because in TV, you covered one series with Alaska Anchorage, the famous studio series, which was a lot of fun, actually. But now, for those last however many years, you got to go up to Anchorage. And I don't know if you had any sub-zero temperatures, but even when it's cold, it's gorgeous up there.
Well, if you don't mind darkness at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's fine. But it is a little depressing at 9 in the morning when you look out your hotel window and you see the Christmas lights on the trees down at street level. That's a little bit depressing. But no, here's the biggest advantage, the biggest difference. For whatever reason, well, all right, when Wally and I did our Channel 29 days and we were booking our own rooms and everything else.
The kitten that roars.
Yep. Legendary. We'd stay in the same hotel that the team did.
Mm-hmm.
And that was good. We had that contact and everything. For whatever reason, when MSC came along and then Fox continued that, we stayed at a different hotel. That was awful.
Mm-hmm.
You're so disconnected because we're on the air, and by the time we get wrapped up and you got to pay homage to everybody in the truck after the game is done, and then the team is gone. And you don't see them until you show up at the rink the next day. I hated that. That was the worst part of the TV travel. So now back in radio, I mean, that's one of the reasons this job is so much more fun. I mean, we have contact with the players on Wednesday, Thursday if we're flying out of town, Friday and Saturday. You can enjoy if they win on the road, you can enjoy that with them. it's just a whole bunch better.
I know that I miss road trips, Frank. My
wife is thinking the same thing.
I think many of the times in Duluth, Vigs, we've been up there and had many good times up in Duluth. I'm hoping we can get back there for another weekend sometime soon. I'm not sure how all those contracts are going to turn out. Everything's kind of shifted a year, but with the Big Ten, we're not seeing these local schools as much, Vigs, and we're not getting road trips. And it was a couple. It used to be almost Duluth every year, and now it's every couple of years that we get to go up there. And I miss those days. I'm guessing you do too, Vigs.
Yeah, it's different when you can't even go to the rink to watch hockey, and you just miss that atmosphere.
The sounds of hockey.
Sounds of hockey, walking around. I enjoy doing the walkabouts at hockey games. Between periods, you get to walk around the concourse and run into people and just have those small interactions where you catch up with people that you haven't seen for a while unexpectedly. The running into people up in the press box when covering games at Mariucci, that's fun. It's hard to not have that in our lives. Even coaching, I'm coaching mini mites and mites for my kids right now. You have to, get there. Kids are already dressed. Coaches have their helmets on and everything. You put on your skates, you go on the ice, you get done, you untie the skates, you're supposed to skedaddle and get out of there. So you just kind of miss that camaraderie. And I know players are kind of going through the same thing, and coaches, you're just not having that time where you get to interact with people that you've taken for granted as being able to spend that much time together with them. And it takes a lot out of it.
And Frank, even further from that, we've got people who have either kind of lost their job or decided to leave their job. You've got Nygaard up in Duluth, who was always there. I'm blanking on the St. Cloud State SID.
Tom Nelson.
Nelson, yes. You see these people at the rink. You see them once a year, but it's still, have a nice conversation with these people. And I think it's that. And even like seeing you, I haven't seen you in almost a year, except for on Zoom here. And it's like, we haven't had a chance to go out and just have a burger at Maxwell's after a game. And that's kind of the most fun, or even after the game, hey, we'll see some of the referees and they'll come over and tell us, yeah, we called this because of that. And, it's just that stuff you don't get when we're sitting at home watching on TV, or you're at the arena or at TCF Bank, broadcasting games.
Right. Or go up to the refs and say, hey, I don't understand this penalty, or I don't understand this whistle. Tell me, give me the reasons. And most of them are just, you approach them the right way, they're going to give you the good explanation.
They're hockey guys. They really are. Yeah. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. You can come up to them and they'll say, oh, that was good. And they'll even say sometimes, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that, but hey, that's how it goes. And you always get the honesty from them. And like I said, they're hockey guys. They completely get it.
Right.
All right, Frank, we got a bunch of Twitter questions. I'm going to hit you up. Darren Bakken, who's your favorite Gopher of all time to watch and your favorite ever Gopher hockey game to broadcast?
There's no answer to that question. I saw that tweet yesterday and I thought,
yep.
The
2007 WCHA Final Five is pretty much a classic.
Yeah.
And the ones before that even. Was it the 2000 other Final Five games? It's just
that one. I'm really happy for the replay on that one. I didn't remember enough about that game. And there's a certain amount of lawyer in me that I present the case and then I dump it and I go on to the next one. And I've done a few, right? I can't remember them all. But anyway, I kind of remember atmospheres more and those kinds of things. And I remember Colorado College coming to Mariucci Arena. And it was the number 1 against number 2.
Backhand Crowley.
Yeah.
Backhand Crowley, that late goal. It erupted.
All I remember is just the whole atmosphere was so energized. That was a great.
Well, I'm a Crowley guy since I went to Jefferson, and I never forget. Rasmussen goes wide, throws a backhand over there. He kicks it with his skate and roofs it backhand right in front of the goalie. I remember the place just erupted. You erupted. I can still hear your voice calling that game. Wow, that was and a lot of people will say, "Hey, how about the Ehrman penalty shot?" We hadn't had a penalty shot you couldn't remember in forever. That crowd was electric. But players, it's a hard time for me. My all-time favorite is Crowley. I'm always going to be biased against it. I think that kid was just magical on the ice. And then you had this week where Bonin and Crowley were two of the Gophers selected to the all 1990s team in the WCHA. I'd say good picks there. So it's hard to pick. How about you, Viggs? Who's your all-time favorite Gopher?
Oh boy, it is a tough one when you start digging back. I definitely remember my first memories of watching Gopher hockey. I was a little kid, and my dad would bring me the old rink, and he had season tickets behind the visiting penalty box, so I could see kind of the Gopher bench, and I could see the visiting team bench really well, and I could hear students above me, and then I had Goldie just to my right, and so it was a great spot as a kid to grow up learning the game, watching the game. And I think my favorite player at that time was Corey Millen. And one of the reasons was when Corey Millen got the puck at his own zone about the blue line, everybody stood up because there was just the feeling that when he touched the puck, he could skate by anybody and there was a scoring chance coming. And so I learned as a little kid, that is something to watch for. And I just gravitated to watching him all over the ice. And that's how I kind of became a college hockey fan. And I just remember seeing him race and just the excitement level of the building. And I just thought that was so neat and special.
Wow. And as just a second thinking about that CC Minnesota game that you called back in the mid-90s, Frank, it was such a big matchup that the highlights of that game actually made it on SportsCenter. College highlights in kind of a middle of a season on SportsCenter because it was such a big matchup. And it was, I remember it was just crazy, the atmosphere, the buildup and everything. But it wasn't one of those top 10 things. It was actually, here are the highlights from this game on SportsCenter that night. So that's how big that game was.
Yeah. Well, it was 1 versus 2. I don't remember who had which ranking at the time, but all I remember is it was a 1 versus 2.
I believe CC was 1 at the time. And then they came back and won the next night. So,
almost anything at the Excel Energy Center, the Final 5. I mean, that was the pinnacle. That was one of those situations where I didn't mind sort of being on the bench then for the NCAAs, because that tournament was as good as any, that tournament was as good as just about any Frozen Four. I mean, it was
except for your final game calling a TV was how many North Dakota games in a row?
6. But who's counting?
Who's counting? Oh, we obviously love the Final 5, but Minnesota was not good. And the 2007 Final 5 championship game was the last time they won a Final 5. They didn't they didn't do much after that.
Well, games were great. I don't know games after. Well, that was things were.
Those mid 2000s was nuts.
Yeah.
Those were the years where you had a lot of players who were looking at where they were going to be in May. And it wasn't going to be in a college hockey uniform. They were going to be looking at pro contracts. And that was the part of college hockey where you went through that transition of the schools that had the deeper, older teams with kids who stuck around were more successful. And these teams that had so many young players never were able to gain the footing. And they were always kind of looking one way. And it wasn't towards the Frozen Four, and it wasn't towards their conference tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But the games were fun.
Followed up a week later with another overtime thriller in the Pepsi Center in front of about 5,000 fans the next week.
Yep.
Not quite the same. And that was a great game, but without the atmosphere in Pepsi Center, it wasn't great. Another question. This is from Lax Ref. Yeah, he wants to know, what road trip do you miss the most since you're not traveling this year?
Michigan Tech.
You never got to do much television there, but you did towards the end. Early on, they never really did TV there, either MSC or early on FSN years.
Maybe did 2 games there somewhere along the line.
Yeah, you did a few towards the end of your TV career.
We did more in Marquette because we had
Northern Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't get crew in Houghton for some reason, unless we were going to bring up all of our people, and that got expensive.
And that's what you did, though. Didn't you guys take a bus up there? And didn't they bus the entire crew up there one year? Holy drunkenness, Batman.
Those of us snobs flew up, and the rest of the crew.
Oh, I remember going up with a bunch of my friends for one of those Houghton series, and they saw you Sunday as you were on your way to the plane, and we all kind of looked at each other and were like, we have a 7-hour drive. No one's quite feeling their best. This is going to be a long day.
Yeah, we weren't feeling our best either, but wasn't a long day. It's just, for some odd reason, it's a fun town. It's just,
oh yeah.
I don't know what's so laid back about it. I mean, there's 2 restaurants there. There's a, what's the one called? The Library, I think, which has great food. And then either that street or another street over, you go down a steep hill. They're all steep. And then there's a breakfast joint down there. There's a great breakfast joint. And then, the beer was...
Well, a lot of the Gopher fans missed that trip so much, and quite a few of them are in the chat right now. They go every summer. They go up there for like an extended weekend and just go to Houghton and do their partying in the summer.
Yeah.
Because they don't get to go on that road trip anymore. So they do that instead.
It's gorgeous up there.
Okay. Viggs, I'm seeing a question, anything possible, but in your guys' eyes, will there be 2 Big Tens in the NCAA field of 16? This is from Steve 2120. I think it's going to be tough to get more than 2 unless Michigan really kind of pushes for a title. But Michigan's not. You never know with Michigan.
Yeah, you never know with Michigan because their team was going through so much turmoil during that first part of the year with guys going to World Junior. Some COVID cases, things like that. So you don't really know what was going on there. I thought, Kemp's discussion about the NCAA tournament this week, Bob Mazzocco didn't really get a lot out of that other than there's going to be some criteria. Jeff Jackson's the Big Ten representative on advising how they're going to move forward. I thought the one interesting thing is that they are going to try to use their existing metrics with like pairwise to basically evaluate teams in conference and figure out which teams out of the conference are the ones that deserve to get a tournament bid. And I was kind of looking at the Big Ten. Most teams have played kind of comparable schedules. Mm-hmm. So the standings of the league match up to the pairwise rankings pretty well. And I think Minnesota and Wisconsin have separated themselves as the 2 favorites to get into the tournament. Now, if one of those teams in the bottom half of the conference win the tournament, when you're playing 3 one-game shots, that is a possibility. The Big Ten, there is some separation overall on the season, but during a shortened, condensed weekend, any of the teams in the league really could come out of it getting that automatic qualifier. Now it's up to the league whether or not they would have that automatic qualifier get the bid or a conference tournament or a regular season champion. I assume they will go for the automatic qualifier. So in that case, maybe Minnesota or Wisconsin doesn't make it through. But I do think the pairwise thing only really applies to certain leagues like Hockey East. When you have a team like BU who's only played 10 games, they rank top for pairwise, but they're like 6th in the league. So we can see something similar happen in some of the other leagues like NCHC, where maybe the team doesn't get enough games, so it's hard for them to finish atop their conference. But it's gonna be the Wild West, smoky room.
Yeah, it's. I was gonna say, Frank, it's gonna be a smoky room. Maybe some deals.
I mean, by the time, Rick Comley was at Northern Michigan, and MSC was still doing the selection show out of the basement of the CCO building, and literally. And well, no, maybe not literally, but it was a very, very small studio. And they were just then starting to do the mathematics on it. And I kind of saw Comley as a bit of a push in that direction, certainly embraced it anyway. And so I don't remember the backdoor Badgers. I was not in college hockey at that time. Was that 80?
Oh boy. You're going back too far for me.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think they had lost regular season, or did not win the regular season. Did not win the tournament, and then magically showed up in the NCAAs, and so they called them the backdoor Badgers or something like that. Anyway, so I don't remember the smoky rooms and all.
But one thing that the Pairwise has done is
how about 2 WCHA teams?
I mean, Minnesota State's making a very strong case this year that they deserve to be in, regardless of what happens in their tournament. And there could be another team. Is Bemidji or Michigan Tech even? Because if you look at the pairwise in their league, as I was just going to pull up, I think Michigan Tech has the 2nd pairwise spot. Bowling Green's 3rd. So we'll see what happens there.
Where's Bemidji?
I think they're 4th.
Wow. And they're the one who keeps showing up in the polls.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've played a really weird schedule.
Well, they played Mankato enough times to boost whatever strength of schedule they might have. Huh. Hey, I missed that news conference or whatever it was, or news release that Mazzocco was talking about. Do we have a 4th region yet?
They say it's going to be announced in the upcoming days, not weeks, but they have another site and it's going to be out east. They want to try to put teams on buses if they can to get to their regional site rather than force plane travel and quarantine issues. So they are going to announce a site out east.
There is going to be plane travel. I mean,
there's going to be some, but they're going to try to reduce it as much as they can.
Who's going to go to Loveland? Denver's not right now. CC's not going to go. Loveland, Colorado is going to be a flight for quite a few teams. In fact, most of the teams. Anyone going to Loveland, it's going to be a flight.
Omaha might be able to, but
that's risky at that time of year though, because you never know when you can get a blizzard in that open area between Omaha and Denver. Whew.
And by the way, Bemidji's actually behind Lake Superior State too in the pairwise. So they're not 4th or 5th.
They need to start winning.
They got to win some games.
What's your source? Where are you?
USCHO and some fancy Excel VLOOKUP tables that I put in. I was kind of looking at the different. I was looking at the Cratch. I was looking at the strength and schedule as much as you can, because I'm just interested to see how it's going to sort out, because I feel like there's going to be some rationale for how they pick the teams, but it's just going to be like lies and statistics. It's like, we picked this team because their Cratch was really good, or their strength of schedule was really good.
Where's AIC in your crystal ball?
AIC is the 2nd team in Atlantic. Canisius has the top pairwise, and Canisius has a much stronger strength of schedule. So the teams that they have played are ahead of AIC's. But I just don't see AIC getting 2 teams, because their pairwise is out of whack so much because they just play each other, and it's a real top heavy conference. Like, the top teams are dominating that league.
Well, how about this weekend, guys? Michigan State coming into town. I we were kind of hoping that Michigan State would start improving, but it's just not improving yet, Vigs. They're at the bottom.
They're at the bottom. They've had a little bit of a talent departure, a little brain drain on that team.
Mhm.
They've got a strong goalie with DeRitter, who's basically keeping them in hockey games, but they just don't have the offense that we've seen the last couple of years for them to really rise up above water and be dangerous. And so this is a kind of a trap weekend, I think, for Minnesota, coming off their high of playing such perfect hockey against Notre Dame. Michigan State doesn't have that same kind of bark and bite, but they still have to keep progressing, because this team, I don't think, can afford to take the foot off the gas too much in this kind of weekend, because they could just create all kinds of problems for themselves again if they don't stay focused.
You know, one thing
I don't think we'll see that, though.
One thing I've noticed this year, though, Frank, is that Minnesota is pretty much, they're undefeated against the lower echelon teams. At least maybe they think they're going to be lower echelon, but they're undefeated against those teams. They don't, I mean, in the past, we'd see they'd lose to a last place team out of nowhere. This year, we're seeing that they are typically losing to much better teams, not the lower end teams like we've seen in the past.
Well, we've had some of the lower end here on the ocean. And can we call it a bandy rink? Anyway, on the big sea. And this team has got the speed to kill you on that rink. I mean, it's amazing. Arizona State worked as hard as they did for as undermanned as they were and as sick as they were to compete as hard as they did. And they still got shellacked, but it was anyway. So, okay, yeah, but I'll go more with what Vieg is thinking. Can't let up here. I mean, you got to take these guys as seriously, until you get yourself a big lead. You got to go after these guys. You got to gnaw at their ankles, and you got to make them pay. Otherwise, it's not like the NHL where in 2 or 3 days you're going to come back and have another game and get yourself back in stride. You're gonna have to wait a week to get back to the game you want to play. So I say you got to go after these guys.
And I think you almost have to come into the weekend with that conservative mindset of we want to get on the forecheck and stick with that game rather than possess the puck like they did against Arizona State and Ohio State, because I think they got used to being able to get away with that. Right. And the space is probably going to be there on the big rink for them to play that style. I'm curious to see if they're able to stick with the forechecking game that Bob wants them to play against a team where they could probably get away with more possession, skill on the rush. So that's kind of what I'll be watching for this weekend.
I'm thinking this team's coming together pretty well. I'm thinking it's going to be 4-1, 5-1 type games this weekend. Anything less than a sweep, and I am really disappointed. They need they need the full 6 points. But they can't be looking ahead. Obviously, we know that the House of Horrors is next weekend. So they need to take care of business this weekend. Yes, Penn State's not as good this year. But they didn't get to solve that problem like they did, or they didn't get to solve that last year. Played well. We're heading out there, and then the season gets shut down. So hopefully they're not looking ahead to Penn State, because Michigan State can still sneak in there and get a win, Biggs.
Yeah, I think this team will be looking at this series. I just hope that they play the right style. I see 6 points coming out of it. Michigan State doesn't have the firepower to keep up with Minnesota if it does start to get into one of those scoring kinds of games. I'm just looking more for that style of play, that they stick to what was successful against Notre Dame, because that's going to be the way they're going to have to go forward. Mm-hmm. And also when they go to Penn State, there's going to be more of a forecheck to release pressure against. Penn State plays more aggressive. So you're going to have players continue to get deep to start the breakout, and you're going to have players support the puck. You can't get in a situation where you get into that 40, 50 foot pass game. Mm-hmm. That's just a bad habit that they will be able to probably execute against a team like Michigan State, but they just shouldn't.
Well, they're not going to be able to do it the weekend after Penn State either, when Michigan comes here.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a fun finish. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
Tim Hapke with a couple of points. He bet Mo gets a start Saturday this week. It might be the last time to get Mo in, so maybe it's this weekend. And then he's like, he would love to see Brodzinski score a goal again.
In his lifetime or this year?
Oh. Okay, Vigs. Mo, do you think Mo should get in at least one game, maybe the Saturday game? If this may be the last chance.
I don't think he gets a game. I think this is Jack's team. I think Bob's made that pretty clear.
Okay.
He's even taken some pot shots at Mo, blaming him for soft goals, which you don't usually see out of a coach.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of confidence in Jack, and the team has a lot of confidence in Jack. I think you'll see him in that all the way down the stretch, unless the team gives up like they did against Wisconsin and he just wants to save them the energy.
Yeah, that's a little different. But so we all think it's sweep this weekend?
Better. No, I'd be disappointed. With you. Yeah.
Let's get it going.
Michigan
Battle
State has
him.
their power, and if they do, I don't know how they're going to get past LaFontaine. And the Gophers have got the firepower that should have an easy time 5-on-5, relatively. I mean, there's no Hiroshi line to worry about anymore, right?
We were killed by his line.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah. That was the only reason they were good the last couple of years, honestly. And so we'll have to wait and see. Well, Frank, you're now back into the lead with your 9th podcast.
Yeah. More than Micheletti?
Mick's been on one show.
He's a piker.
But Todd Molesky had just tied you last week with 8 appearances. And he's on twice a year now because, obviously we play the Badgers twice. So he's going to pass you up here soon. Sorry. But you're our longest tenured guest. Show number 2, and this is 188. Yeah. But we thank you for coming on, Frank.
You're welcome. When was the first year? Just so I can.
10 years ago. 10. So it was 2000, fall of 2010.
And you put me on, and I was on the bench. I was.
Oh boy, you were not on the bench.
Yeah, I was.
I don't think so. Were you?
Yeah. Well, hello. I do remember the pink slip.
Yeah, well, I'll check that in overtime.
Check that.
I'll check that in overtime.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to wrap up the show here, Frank. Let me produce the show, and we'll do that in overtime.
I'm tired of producers.
We'll get into that in overtime as well. Vigs, you got any last wishes here?
Just look forward to this weekend. Stay out of the box on those offensive zone penalties, Gophers. Your coach doesn't like it. I know that the stick might come out for players who do that. We've seen that with a couple guys like Brodzinski who've read the riot act about taking penalties in 200 feet from their own net. That's something that could make this weekend more difficult than it needs to be. And when their top 4 penalty killers are the guys who are taking those penalties, like Nelson, Myers, Walker, McLaughlin, it hurts their penalty kill. So that's the only way they can get themselves in trouble this weekend.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this podcast this week. We want to thank Frank Mazzocco again for joining us for his 9th time on the podcast. It's always great to have him here. We'll be back next week to recap of this series with MSU and preview the series with Penn State. We'll have to see how that goes. I'm looking forward to it. For those of you currently watching live, we'll have a bit of overtime coming up next. For the rest of you, stay tuned. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.